ready to go.
Okay.
So let's go.
All right, I will go ahead and call to order the USD 489 negotiations for Tuesday, April 21st.
First, I guess we'll go to get started. I guess we were going to see if you guys had any particular items you wanted to address first, as far as getting things rolling.
No, you said you were going to bring some proposals, so we would
We basically
take
got
a look at those.
a list of items that we figured to kind of cover
Okay.
the list of things and kind of what we were looking for in each one of them. And we're going to try to have, what was the deal, I think 2 to 3, I think, a week as we went through some of these per meeting to go through the whole proposals that we'll have on some of those. So.
Do you have full proposals?
Not yet, no, we will. I think what our goal was to have 4 to 5 put together for today, and it just didn't materialize at the time we wanted to do. And so what we tried to do in our meeting last night was go through and just kind of tell you guys where we're at on, instead of, the notices are all very secretive and vague and not intentionally, but that's, I know, but what we did is we kind of went through, and I'm going to go through it, but we put together probably a more specific of where we're at, and then I think we're going to push for 3 to 4 in writing proposals, and then the goal is at the end of it we would have a proposal of a final contract language as well, maybe not right at the end, but at some point we present all
kind of
that
like
in a package of what the whole thing would look like at the end, of what our proposal would be. And then as we go through them, we kind of explain them maybe in the next meeting, let you guys
eventually have the tentative agreement.
well, or just a proposed tentative agreement. I think what we've talked about is that it's easier to have a discussion about, instead of just talking in circles about words, we did that last time, well, what about this and that's in there? And if I were on your guys' side, I'd be doing the same thing. When you're looking at it, you're always thinking, well, how's this going to work? How's that? Well, if it's in writing, it's at least a lot easier to visualize the concept, and then then we can talk about, what's missing or what you guys don't like or have concerns about. But the thought process is if it's in writing and all kind of laid out, it's easier to fashion the discussion around it, and then we can figure out what we go from there.
But in past years, once you had it written out, then once we came to an agreement on both sides, we do the tentative agreement where we sign it, and that's where we're going, right?
Right. But what I was saying is I think our goal is that once we get all these components, then we're going to have their office draft what the whole agreement would look like. That's not going to be the tentative. If we agree on everything, it would be, but and then we discuss everything as we go along, and then at the end of the day, we'd have whatever we come up with will be a tentative agreement, and everybody will take it out with their respective sides. Other than putting the exact proposals in writing, I don't really see it's doing it much different from what we've done the last few years.
Did you do anything with the language we gave you on maintenance of standards?
That's one of the things that we did.
I don't think it's on there, but I think we have significant concerns about that language. Just putting it in at all. My read on it is that I'm not sure what the intent of it is, and I think
The intent is that the contract would stay the same unless we change it. So it would be like a continuing contract, so that each year we don't have to start from scratch. And that also gives stability to the teachers to know, like when you're recruiting a teacher, you don't have to say, well, this is your contract now, but a year from now, maybe not. So it gives you more recruiting ability because it presents a more stable environment. And it also saves time, but we don't have to start over from scratch.
But it puts us behind the 8 ball, and we've got to start, we're locked into that.
But so are we. We're all locked into it.
Right.
Unless we have this process every year that we can change things.
I guess if it was all, if we thought it was the best contract in the state, and I understand why you guys do, and I'm not faulting you for that, but if it was the best from the board's perspective, and we wanted to put that in, it would be you guys would probably fight that because, I mean, at that point, it's all lined up in our favor, or a lot of it is, and then, you know, trying to go the other direction is difficult, so.
Well, I would even have to say on terms of maintenance of standards in that regard, it almost seems as though that we as negotiating for the teachers is to say that we're trying to also learn from our mistakes of the years prior to the fact that when we're stating Kansas statutes and then have Kansas statutes get ripped out from under us and we don't have any type of due process agreements that are established within the contract. Just in the same way, this maintenance agreement would be one in which we've seen already being stated at the State House to know that those proposals are not something that are being just willy-nilly tossed around. They're being strongly considered to talk about having terminating contracts at the end of every single school year. And to know that we can have the stability as teachers within the district to realize that those types of state actions, we can be possibly buffered from those, is something which seems to be one in which, like I said, trying to learn from the mistakes of the past of not having any due process language, but only referencing a statute.
And, you know, when you say we have the best contract on the teacher side, that's for the district as well, because when you have one of the best contracts in the state, you recruit some of the best teachers in the state.
And there's varying opinions on that. I mean,
Well,
obviously.
and Mr. Cat referred to that last night, because when we're hiring, we're recruiting from other districts. You're getting people coming in from other districts, and you
Is
can't
that
do
because of
that.
our contract or is it because of our community? I mean,
Probably both.
both.
Right, I mean,
I would
it's-
assume.
If I were looking for a different job, I'd be looking at those things, and the teachers would be foolish not
But are
to.
people moving here because of the teaching job or because, you know, I mean, there's so many dynamics about why would you move to Hayes? I mean, did their spouse get a job? Are they coming back home? Are they, you know, is it just that the contract's so great that they want to be back here? But I mean, it all goes into the equation.
Well, to be
Probably not
frank,
because we have cheap housing.
Exactly. It's definitely not because of the housing market.
Not
But
that
yet,
housing.
I know that we've drawn teachers within 30 miles, a 30-mile radius, which they
15
can
miles.
easily enjoy the amenities of our community, but yet somehow, some way, we're bringing them to USD 489. And so I would have to contest that those are part of the contract. But that's the language that's concerning their maintenance mostly. is
Well,
that
I think ours is
locking
that it
in.
locks us in, you know, right now where we've got a lot of changes we'd like to see made, you know, and then, I mean, as I read it, that you couldn't, I mean, basically, the way I read it is that we couldn't change anything if it wasn't specifically spelled out in some sort of fashion. And it's kind of at least that's the way I read the language.
I think it's continuing the contract law
Right.
like we have now. Basically, we're under the continuing contract law now, and we're worried the state's going to rip that out from under us, and this language just protects us to say that we'll continue with the continuing contract language. So it'd be negotiating just like we do.
And there are good things in the contract too that, I mean, the board agreed to, and so it would take those things away too. You know, I don't think anybody would want to start from scratch every year.
Well, even if the legislature does what they're saying it will, and it
Not
shock
necessarily will,
me,
but could.
well, and likely will. I mean, they'll do it. It'll get slid in under some bill, but.
Can you support that instability?
No, I think I've been pretty clear on my lack of support for current governor. So, but you know, the reality is that's who's there, and he got reelected, and you know, obviously the majority likes them. So, but that's what we're dealing with. But assuming it did get put in there, I mean, I don't see this board or you guys saying, well, okay, now we need to start. What are we going to put in paragraph 1? And then, you know, and just start from scratch. Nobody wants to do that, but, you know, I mean, I would guess, though, that if they did change that, you guys would be, and the provision you hated in the contract that we had that was in our favor, we would, if it wasn't noticed up, we'd probably all be going, oh, wait a second, you know, we'd be scrambling to argue it was in there, and you guys would say, we didn't notice it, so we can't put it in there, so. But it cuts both ways, but.
Being a newer face on it, with that maintenance idea of whatever that language is, doesn't it also help in protecting, like in case negotiations would go to a point of impasse? isn't that like what we're talking about with the continuing contract clause into the fact that like in
Well, I
impasse
think in advance, you've got, if that's where we would end up, you've got path one, as teachers, you guys can either, assuming we issue the unilateral contract, you can either sign it or you can keep last year's. So we don't, I mean, we would need that language to add that.
Okay.
Okay, that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a legal clarification there, but I don't think, I mean, I know what you're saying about the statute, listing the statutes and stuff, but I don't think every year that anybody would say we got to negotiate everything in there.
I think that's been mentioned in Topeka, that
Well,
we talked
but,
about that
maybe
the contract would be
somebody
only a
that-
year.
But it's also been
If the
mentioned
board
about
starts
only
technically-
picking like five items.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
So there's been.
I don't know what benefit that would be to the board or you or anybody to say, oh, we're going to do this every year. I mean, that's my opinion, but I just,
And that's why we put that in, that's why we raised that.
Well, I mean, I can appreciate your concern, but I mean, I just don't see anybody on the board currently or the newly elected members praising what's happening in Topeka. And I think you were at the debate, and I didn't hear anybody on that panel say it. I mean, I don't think anybody on the current panel or the current board praised.
Well, and that's,
But-
another reason we had noticed that is because the continuing contract law does also protect from those ups and downs. And it does, I mean, our schools shouldn't be, at the mercy every year of craziness going on in Topeka. So it does protect us and keep things more stable. And things change. We've changed our contract over time. But it does prevent.
We used to do 2-year contracts.
We did.
And that was before my time, but
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
did.
that was something that was done.
Sure. We've done it.
You guys changed and didn't want to do that anymore, so I
No,
understand.
that is not true. No.
Well, that's,
No,
I've sat through a lot of these.
we do
I
it.
mean, I just know that that's what's been discussed in the past. I don't have the minutes to reflect that.
As I recall, we stopped doing those when funding was too unpredictable. When funding was more predictable, then we did 2-year contracts. But when the state started doing crazy stuff on funding and cutting, and then when enrollment started dropping, we couldn't predict ahead of time. And the board didn't want to lock into a 2-year contract either, because we were having decrease in population, and they didn't know how much they were going to have.
Wouldn't that
So-
same argument hold true then right now, though, with funding being so unpredictable
Sure.
in the state and that? Why would we want to lock in on something like that and keep the existing? We don't have a choice moving forward.
But
If cuts are made and things like that.
with the
Right.
block grant, I don't know how unpredictable funding is, at least
Right.
for 2 years.
For 2 years.
Well, yeah, but if once that goes in,
Yeah.
I know,
getting
but
it
I'm
out
just,
is not, I mean, it's not.
but I'm just saying that,
But once we put it in though, it's not like in 2 years, all of a sudden magically you guys are going to say, oh, let's take it out because the block grant's gone.
That's our concern. Once it goes in, it's hard to get out.
I'm just unclear because it's just stating that we'll continue the policy that we've been going through for the last 20 years. That we have a continuing contract, regardless of what the state of Kansas says, and that every year you will notice items that you would like to discuss.
Maybe if we have, maybe if we get the contract revised to a position that we think it needs to be, that may be a much more feasible position, but right now, it's not. And, I mean, that's the problem we have is that, I mean, when you hear our list, you and I kind of talked after the debate, and I gave you an idea of some of the things, but I mean, when you guys hear that, I mean, there's a substantial list of things we want to change, and if we don't get them all done this year, we don't want to be locked in, that we've got to fight harder next year to get things where we think it needs to be, or I guess they, next year. But I think right now, there's no support from the board to do it. I mean, obviously, we have to take back any proposals. I don't know if this would be a new proposal, but there's no support for that at this point in time. But it's,
So like even the actual continuing contract law now, you disagree with it?
we've had no discussions on that. I mean, you want to have.
Just the maintenance of standards thing.
I mean, that just
But
really
that's-
continues, that's what it is. It's just.
The continuing contract. So if they decide at the state level that our contract terminates every year, then we say our contract continues, and we just notice and discuss like we are doing now. I mean, I'm not sure what you, because even if they terminate our contract every year, wouldn't we have to negotiate all those things back the way they are, or change them?
Theoretically, yes.
And you could do that
But-
now because you can notice it and it's the same difference?
But if you didn't have that language in, you could start from saying, hey, here's what last year's is. Do we want to start with that as the basis for the negotiations, or do we want to start from scratch? And it would be something you can start your first meeting on, probably. And if somebody on one side said start from scratch, we all know that it's going to go a long time. And that's, I mean, you decide to do it.
How would that kind of instability be good for education, or even for the students, for the teachers, for anyone? How would that kind of instability be good? What would that be good for?
I'm not saying, we're not proposing, I mean, that's the legislature.
There's a lot of speculation.
Right.
We don't even say it's going to
support
happen.
But we are saying that we have an opportunity to have stability, and what I'm hearing is, if you had the chance, you'd gut it.
No, that's not right. I think we tweak a lot of it. I mean, if you go back and look at that contract, half of it doesn't make sense. I mean, you can go look at, we could have a field day going through it. It's a mess. It needs to be rewritten. Whether it's changing all the terms or not, it needs to be rewritten. And
that's this process we have every year.
right, oh yeah. But it's, I mean, we just have never, I've been on this a long time, and, you know, as you look at it, it's just, I mean, it's not a fine work of art. There's been too many changes, and I don't think the standard for adopting and rewriting it hasn't been great. And, you know, I've been here through that. I think I'm the only one that has, and so there's, you know, I guess I bear some responsibility, but it needs to be, you know, just the grammar in it, and, you know, the references and things like that don't all tie together. We have, if not the longest, one of the longest contracts in the state. And, you know, not that length matters, but you know, there's a lot of provisions in there that could be eliminated and not change the contract rate. A lot of things are in board policy.
Well, I'd say let's move to the next area. We know that that's something that we all want to discuss as far as the maintenance of standards. And I know that's something, and I've jotted that down, and something we can actually go back and talk to the board about as well. But I would, as Greg kind of said, I think part of the thing we're wanting to do is move forward on the other stuff, and then after you've heard some of our proposals and things like that as well, and, you know, depending on what changes made, that might make a difference as well as far as whether or not there's support for it on our side.
And what we did is we kind of went through our letter and tried to define, and I don't have, Dean, I didn't bring my copy of that. You have yours?
Yeah, here, no, give it to me.
I've got the notes. The first one was just on salary and wages, and, you know, basically the board's position on that is we think we have a plan in place that we would be able to do horizontal movement this year, and that would include everybody getting caught up to the extent they're not. There may be more for either vertical or some type of raise, depending on what comes out of negotiations and some of these other provisions. So that's, I think, kind of where we're at on that first bullet point. And if you guys, if I get going too fast, just tell me to slow down. The next was just a grammatical change from assistant superintendent to director of curriculum, I think it is, isn't it? Or just changing
director
the title. The next one was extended duty contracts, and that was, that one was, I don't know that I have a note on that. Do you remember what that one was?
Did I hand you the wrong letter? Is that their letter?
No, this is ours. I must have missed, I've got, from that one on, I've got everything, but I don't have that one.
I think it was the same thing that,
Just says it should be updated
We-
to reflect current tracks.
right. I think some of them don't have the numbers of people, and same things you guys had talked about, middle
Sure.
school level, head
And then we'll
coach
add the
positions,
soccer.
I think that's the only thing that we had, yeah, and I have a note about adding soccer, so, yeah.
The next one was on severance pay, which kind of ties into the, well, it does tie into the sick leave. But on that, we want to look at a plan that caps the amount of time that can be accumulated, and then also adjust the payout, how that is accomplished, and whether it be we don't have, we're just trying to give you guys an idea of what we're looking at, and then the
These are these
specifics.
first 4 to 5 things.
We're going to go through the whole letter with everything, and then we'll come back. I can't tell you the order, but we're going to come back with 4 or 5 of them with a specific proposal that'll say, on this, here's what our proposal is. And, but we would then adjust, whether it's, right now it's 65, maybe at so many days it's going out, or, they plan to either scaling back of that or a grandfathering or something that would adjust that. The next one is the concurrent credit issue, and essentially what we're looking at doing on that is we'd like to cap the amount that the teachers receive. A lot of districts are paying half. We're looking at something that as the number goes up, that maybe the number's frozen at a present day value and the addition goes back to the district. So, the next one was hours and amount of work, and this dealt, these next couple here, I'm going to lump them all together, but it's really a work schedule issue. We want to look at adding additional days back into the contract. We want to look at adding additional time to the workday, and I think some of that's already started. We have a calendar committee, and we want to continue that as far as breaks and or school break, spring break, those sorts of things, but with the understanding that the board has final say on that, and then also that the board would have final say on the class schedule, whether we have a block or not, whether we have a 7-hour day or an 8-hour day, that would be ultimately decided by the board.
Isn't that a mandatory negotiable item? I believe it is.
The class schedules? I think
Yes.
the length of the days, but I don't think the schedule is.
Number of periods.
That's where we're at, so we'll look at that. The next one was, again, got back to the sick leave, and again, it ties into what we talked about earlier, but we're looking at coming up with a PTO plan that has a cap on accumulation and eliminating essentially all the leave days except for PTO and only going to that. So we think it's beneficial both to teachers and to the district. So the next is types of leave available, and I think we took care of that with PTO. The next one is the early retirement. We want to modify the 403B substantially, or I guess depending on how you look at it, but change the vesting period, and then looking at a way to convert that to a plan that's self-funded. Dean's got some ideas and where he's been, and a lot of these where, once your initial phase-in period is done, it's pretty much not a cost factor to the district. And so that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to take that along with the early health insurance, or the retirement health insurance issue. And the plan was to eliminate one with the other, but the problem is we're paying out $150,000 to $200,000 a year in the hopes that 17 years from now we'll save some money on the other one. And that just isn't a very smart financial decision. It's taking money away from the students and not, we don't see the benefit as much. If we can come up with a plan that's more self-funded, then that makes sense. But the vesting period's way too short now, there isn't one. And so that's, I think, what we're looking at. And then on the early retirement health insurance, we're just wanting to get rid of that, and the sooner the better. That's just it's a benefit that's just not really offered in any other line of work that's out there anymore. Some schools still have it, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense for the district to pay out $350,000 to $500,000 a year for people to leave early so they can retire early. So that's, we'd rather take that money and use it to pay the teachers that are there that have, to have in-service and other things that we can actually benefit the students from. Once the teacher retires and we're still paying their health insurance, there's no benefit to that student. So, the next one is medical insurance. We want to remove the requirement that we negotiate the carrier. We want to cap the amount. Obviously, we'd have to negotiate that amount every year, but as we look at other districts' contracts, and that's pretty much the standard, is that the district will provide a single health plan not to exceed X amount of dollars. And that's kind of what we're looking at. We'll still continue to have a health insurance committee where teachers would have a voice and have an ability to sit on that committee and be educated on what we're looking at and what any changes would look like, and express their opinions that would ultimately report to the board, and then that the board would have the final say on that. The grievance procedure is the next one, and essentially what we're going to do is we're going to remove arbitration language from the entire contract, specifically on that. And we have no problem with a procedure, but we want the final hearing to be adhering to the Board of Education, and that be the end of that. And the next one deals with disciplinary procedures, and I think that one, the termination non-renewal, is the next two in terms of individual contract. I think all gets to the kind of the tenure due process discussion, and I think we want to remove any language on that, but I think the board's willing to look at some modified form of due process, something that's reasonable, that we can appreciate that there could be times when teachers are, whether it's because you've got a principal that's maybe not, that you don't mesh with, or you got a board member's kid that just failed your class, that there could be a time that those, I'm not saying they have happened, but I'm just trying to think of scenarios where there might be times where the teacher may need to have some protection so they're not just fired because Johnny didn't get the right grade or he's not playing enough, or whatever the case may be. That we want to make sure there's some protections there.
Are you on this discipline procedures now? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, it's kind of that one, and then the next 1, 2, 3.
I don't see anything after that.
Yeah, our letter stops with Article 8,
You have Article 8, you don't have anything else.
the one that was sent on January 27th.
There should be 2 pages on it.
There was another.
There's 2 pages, it's front and back.
But then it still
I
stops.
have the original
at-
letter.
And it has it signed.
Yeah.
Here's the original letter. It stops with disciplinary, Article 8, the last thing listed.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to keep going. We can deal with that later. This is where we're at. We've got to deal with that. We can. And we'll get you a copy of this. But
You're adding to your notice letter?
I'm not saying we're adding. My understanding, we sent this one. So if we didn't, and we got to address that, then we can. But
This is the actual letter you gave, and it's signed by your board attorney. this is it.
Well, this is signed by Dean Cat.
Well, it's not being continued.
Or signed by me, but this is sent by, this is the others I have are just copies. This is the actual letter we received.
Well, and we can argue about that later. I'm just telling you what we want to talk about. I mean, if you guys take the position we can't talk about it, then we can deal with that later, but, I mean, I assume you want to know what.
Well, I'd like a copy of that.
That's what I'm saying.
Here.
This is all I've got, is with Dean's notes, but I can get you a clean version.
How many more items do you have after the disciplinary procedure?
6.
You want to be done by June 30th?
You emailed it to you?
I can.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got if you've got the copy that was sent to me, forward that email to them as well. But the next one is the termination and non-renewal, the next 3, or 2, and then the other one's terms of the individual contract, page 41 and 44. But essentially, that's what we just talked about. The reemployment.
Some of the word.
Well, I think the concern is that we want to look at, if there is reduction in force or something of that nature, the concept of just because you're the last one in, you're the first one out, we want to look at something that takes into consideration licensure, evaluations, just because you were the last one hired doesn't mean you're the worst teacher. It just means you were the last one hired. And for us, the concept would be that we want to have the best teachers.
Doesn't that seem like you're trying to mix together the evaluation system and the termination system? I mean, if you have someone that you don't think is a strong teacher, you should be working.
Evaluation system is for,
You should be working with that. But
Oh, sure.
if you're saying, I'm going to use the RIF process to weed people out,
that's something
we have a
I'm
RIF
saying.
and a recall, that you're saying like you're,
We'll get that clear. What we're saying
really need to
is,
copy that.
I understand. What we're saying is that if we have a reduction in force, we want to make sure that, we're bringing back the best ones, not just the opponent's turn.
So, yeah, you're saying seniority is gone.
you don't want to honor seniority at all.
Well, I mean,
At the end of the day, I mean, I understand seniority, but don't you want the best teachers that are here? Just because somebody's been here for 20 years and somebody's been here for 15 years, if the person's been here for 15 years is a much better teacher, or much stronger, and have much better reviews, is that really fair just because the person's been here for 20 years to say, okay, they're staying and this person's going?
But in a way, that's subjective. I know our evaluation tool is not supposed to be as subjective as it used to be, but if you've got an elementary teacher in one building that's been here 20 years and another one in another building that's been here 15, they're evaluated by two totally different principles.
that's why you have an evaluation that evaluates the evaluators. So that way you make sure that you're having, that the standard is the same.
Well, who evaluates the evaluators then? Is that you guys?
Well, no, that would be Shanna, Dean. I mean, your evaluators are your principals, right?
My evaluators?
Yeah. And, I mean, we don't want to be processing that. That's not, I mean, I have no desire to do that. I don't think anybody else on the board wants to do that, but it's, we get to do the hard part. When they make a recommendation to us to eliminate a position or do something, we have to vote on it. So we want to make sure we have the best information too.
Well, I understand that. I totally agree with wanting to know, or having the best information, but
But an effective evaluation system, which is we have a poor evaluation system. When you're evaluating every 3 years, it's not an effective tool. It's not a protective tool for you guys. I mean, if you're getting evaluated every year, and next year somebody comes along and says, Ron, we're going to get rid of you because we don't think you're the best teacher. Somebody else is. You have an evaluation that goes back every year to say, well, how come for the last 10 years I've got top marks on all my evaluations, but today it's different? But if we don't do that, it sets you up too. And I mean, ideally, you reward those that are great. We don't have a system set up for that, but that would be an ideal situation, that the great teachers get better treatment than the poor teachers. Hopefully we don't have any of those, but if you do, I mean, I can't, I mean, in every job I've been at, if you're working your butt off over here and somebody across the hall is doing nothing, and you know at the end of the year, if we get raises, we're both getting the same, I mean, what's the incentive to do better?
Well, how many, and I don't know this number, but because I'm asking, but how many districts in Kansas right now use the merit pay system?
And that's not on our proposal.
No, but essentially, isn't that what you're talking about, though?
No, we're just saying that the last in, first out. I mean, the best example of this I've heard is Fran Tarkington said it best, is, he was talking about this whole concept, and he said, if last in, first out was the best plan, I'd still be the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings, because he'd never leave. No, he was the last one there.
Well, I understand
Or the first
that.
one there.
And I know, I mean, you guys do not want to, apples to oranges here, because it's not the same thing. Athletic performance, the bottom line is everybody gets older, their skills decline. I think in teaching oftentimes that the longer you do it, and I'm talking about myself, the longer I've done this, I know I'm better than I was first 5 years in, 10 years in.
Would you say every teacher in the district is that way?
I would never say.
Experience matters.
I wouldn't say, Greg, I would never say.
It was just,
No, I can't tell you that just because every attorney, Michael, I think, can attest it's just as much, just because, if that's the case, then you would only look at the oldest attorneys and hire them, and, that's just not
Experience
the
does
case.
matter, though, and we do learn from our
Don't get me wrong,
experience.
experience does
Sure.
matter if you have a plan or a process in which to make teachers better, an evaluation tool to make sure that they are getting better.
We probably should clear the air on that one there, because the fact is that we're not being evaluated every 3 years. We're being evaluated every single year in multiple formats and in multiple ways. And that documentation is being acquired over those 3 years to be able to be formally compiled into a formal evaluation. But those opportunities to interject and redirect teaching in various different types of capacities and different methods for the way that instruction is going on in the classroom is happening. So please don't though tell anybody that we're only being evaluated once every 3 years.
So I've talked to a
We
number
did
of teachers that have told me, I've come from other districts, and this is the only district that's been this lax. And I know it's getting better, but, those are the things that make it difficult for us, is, which one is it?
And I know what you're saying, Greg, but I still think, and I know this might be a little bit what I'm not talking about, but how we do on tests, state tests, ACT tests, I would think that should prove something about the effectiveness of our current staff. And whether you're evaluating that, do you see what I'm saying?
I've run the numbers on that. I
and
have them for every year since they go back in the Department of Ed to see where we score. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I have the whole spreadsheet on it.
And we've performed exceptionally, I think.
Education Week has an article, March 24th, 2015. New studies find that for teachers, experience really does matter, and it was conducted by Brown University professors. And, I can send you this article, but it talks about how teachers are better, and beyond test scores, they're better for kids.
I think you're right. To give it no credit would be inaccurate. Experience matters, especially, you guys are the ones that are here, so you're the ones that, you're devoting time to other things. But, this concept that just because I have this profession and I've gotten this degree makes me the best. Every lawyer had to go to 3 years of law school. That doesn't make them all great. There's a whole range of lawyers. There's a whole range of computer people and doctors and every other profession there is. And so, just the concept that because we have great ones, everyone's great.
So you think, we spent a great deal of time implementing the new evaluation system, so are you saying now that you don't support that system?
No, I didn't say that. I think we were pretty clear on that when it came out, that we don't support for 3 years. We didn't have done anything. I think the board was, at least some of the board members were clear on that. I don't know if we voted to make it, but the concept was that's a great first start. Let's get to an annual.
You'd have to hire more administrators because it's a time-consuming document.
I don't think anybody can argue. I think we've definitely made great steps as far as the evaluation system in the past year or two here. As far as moving forward. I mean, before the past 2 years or so, I would say in that just, I mean, it was basically done every 3 years, if that, in some areas. I mean, we sat and visited with multiple teachers in other areas where they basically got a form letter that we have copies of that said, well, this was basically what we got. This was our basically review. And that was in our district at numerous buildings. So, like I said, I think we've made great strides in the evaluation system, but I also think it's something that needs to continue to improve and continue to find better ways to do this as far as whether it's, you know, and I don't know if that means that you have to have additional staff. I don't know. Like I said, I do think though it has gotten a lot better.
The next few here, there's only a couple more, but there's a policy, there's several policies. One's on communication by employees to the board, and I think there's like a drug-free policy and some other things that are all covered in the agreement, but they're also covered by board policy, and so we don't think they need to be in there. They're not really enforceable in a number of regards, so but we'll get the list of those. The involuntary transfer procedure, there's a provision that requires that a reason has to be given as to why. We'd like to eliminate that. There's still an opportunity, I think, to have I can't remember what the language was, Dave, but to request a meeting, I think is what it was, and that would still be
The voluntary or the involuntary?
involuntary. And then, again, arbitration's in there in another section. We'd like to get anything that relates to arbitration. And just the last one is kind of what we talked about last time, just a general verbiage cleanup to typos, wording, make sure everything's in the correct person. And refer to the board somewhere, it's referred that way throughout, not differently. That's what we have. I know it's a lot, but we just wanted to, and I guess that we kind of want to leave it to where maybe you guys can then tell us, and I don't know if you're ready to do it today, if you are, great, but just more specifics about where you're at on yours. If you have specific proposals, great. If not, then, but just so everybody kind of knows.
Well, we didn't notice as many things as you noticed, and we have, we noticed salary, which that's not even, you don't even know yet. There's, you know, we're not going to talk about salary till we know what the money is.
Yeah, that's usually the last thing.
We noticed, I don't notice. We noticed, I think we gave you information, we noticed the supplemental salaries, we took care of it. The leave is very simple, that it appears you want to talk about leave in other ways, so that might, you know, that might get wrapped up in that. We had the elementary intervention meeting time. We had the language for fair dismissal, and I think we already gave you some language for fair dismissal last year, but I think you have some.
I have what we
And
did
that was
last
it. I mean, our list was relatively short. So, you know, I don't know that we gave you the language we wanted on maintenance of standards. So, no, we don't have anything we need to present to you today because unless you need more fair dismissal policy. The superintendent's composed.
You're just doing what we had last year, or is that what you're saying?
Well, we can,
Or do you have?
We can tweak it.
we can tweak
Well,
it,
I
but we
understand,
have,
just that would be your starting.
the one that we gave last year was the one that the superintendents put together, and we felt like it was fair, and the superintendents felt like it was fair, so that was when we started.
Well,
I ask a question real quick? It's, as you referred from your articles that you had in your notice and everything, it seems as though that you've been pulling a lot of information from other school districts. Do you happen to have a list of those school districts in which you possibly obtained any of your information?
I don't have it now, but I mean, a couple of,
I mean, we've heard from, in terms of just different board meetings and stuff, that whether it be USD 305,
McPherson, Bueller, right there.
At least two of those that you just named are in the innovative schools district. Are you pulling from them as anything school districts?
We're just looking at,
Those-
I mean,
they're-
we're trying to look at the whole range of them to see, what others are doing.
But most of the
Theoretically,
credentials
what
are in
they're
terms
doing.
of size, probably.
Well-
Something comparable in our size and almost.
They're in the, the districts we're competing with, and, 4, 5A, and then, Blue Valley, Shawnee Mission, just because they're kind of, we've talked about in years past, they're, kind of everybody puts them up at the top, whether they are or not, it's.
Well, some of them have stuff that we have nothing in our contracts about, like, some of them pay for the teacher's education to get a master's. We have nothing on that. We pay for that ourselves, so, I mean, we could kind of go back and forth on everybody.
We could cherry pick some
Yeah.
contracts too, but I mean.
Yeah, I'm just saying that if we start
The
looking at
longevity.
those
We're not
contracts.
cherry picking anything, we're trying to go through and look just so we can get an idea as far as language and see how other places are doing.
Well, other places have longevity pay.
Which is.
So do we. And that's the salary schedule, right?
No.
No.
Not the longevity
pay
pay.
is once you're in here for a certain amount of years that you're also getting a bonus on top of your salary schedule pay because they're not paying for your capped time off, your leave time. And that's exactly like
But
what
those
you're.
come with money that are freed up by not having early retiree health insurance, by the district being able to select the insurance policy. I mean, we had, just those two alone, if we would have done those 2 years ago, it'd be $1.1 million annually.
Well, even in some of those that you just mentioned, like McPherson, Bueller, and Abilene, they all have graduated systems of ending their early retirement systems because a lot of districts came under the exact same pressures that we did and currently still are facing. But yet, so we shouldn't necessarily say that it's tit for tat on those issues as to where that money is actually being freed up because they're still in the same process that we are, waiting those things out of their schedules like we are. But those systems of the longevity pay and those types of bonuses and the educational credits and those types of things are there as well. I mean, we can even talk about Tonganoxie, in which when they go ahead and base their payment out for sick leave, it's not a set rate, it's a percentage of their base that they'll pay per day, which is 0.3%.
What you're doing right now is the same thing we're doing, is looking at it going, well, what are other districts doing? I mean, we're not just trying to, I mean, some of this we look at as a board and say, okay, that makes no sense. That doesn't happen in any other professional organization. And so then you go, okay, well, but what are we competing against? Are they offering it at these other districts that are, surrounding us? And then you look at it and say, well, we're the only one that we can find that doesn't have a capped leave system. And I know we're jumping around here, but those are the things we're looking at, and those all cost dollars. And so the question, I think, for us is do we want to take the money and put it into a system that says, well, we're going to reward early retarees to leave, or 403B for only those select percentage that take advantage of it, or would we rather have that money back and be able to reward everybody with it, so everybody, instead of, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that if we save all that money, we're going to turn it all back into salaries. That's not going to happen, but there's no hope of getting any additional money for salaries unless we either cut services, raise fees, or eliminate benefits, or cut staff. I mean, those are the ways to do it. I mean, you have to either cut somewhere. I mean, I guess there's a fifth option that doesn't look very remote, that the state would give us more money. Or very likely, I should say. But I mean, we're not trying to be,
I understand that. No, you've said it many times, that you understand why we're protective of our agreement.
If I were on the other side of the table, I'd be pounding my fist and arguing.
And that's just it there in that idea as well. It's because I think no matter whatever agreement that you look at, whatever district it might be, that there are people sitting around tables just like this that say, these are our package deals. This is the best thing that we can offer for our staff, for our employees, and a great recruiting tool and everything else like that.
I can get you a stack of articles, and you guys might be able to do the same in a way. You know, last year, just the number of school districts that had, you know, did a lot of the things that we wanted to do that we didn't. Well, we just held neutral last year pretty much. We didn't change much of anything, but, you know, and so, and like probably in the last 2 years, and, you know, made substantial changes. We really haven't done a lot. There's been, and in the 12 years I've been on board, you go back and look at the contract, it's reflected, there's very little been carved out of that thing for you guys, on your side.
That's because we don't want to cut and pay. I mean,
Well,
most of these things that you talk about, while the district may save $1.5 million, you're talking about the teachers losing. I mean, you're talking about young teachers with kids.
Young teachers, I mean, if I'm a young teacher, I've got to look at it and say, how important is it to me that, you know, if I'm going to be here for the next 15 years, how important is it that we have an early retiree health plan that I'll never see? And I could have gotten a raise every year.
If you were a young teacher, you wouldn't have the job because the retiree would still be here.
Maybe.
Probably. They can't leave.
Well,
If
they can leave
that's-
whenever they want,
you know,
yeah.
Well, yes, they can leave whenever they want, but that's why they've left. And, you know, the thing that's bothersome too is that we have these committees and they spend a great deal of time working through these issues. And I served on that committee with the administrators and with the board. And we should respect the work that those committees do because they did a lot of background work on it. And then now we come in and we just say, oh, throw it out. You know, why do we ask people to serve on those committees if we're going to disregard everything they look at? Because they do really look at those things. And then we just sit here and just disregard it all.
That was 4 years ago.
Right. And we did make a decision at that time, and we are phasing it out. But
But
to
the
just...
phase out 17 years away, the end of it.
Right.
I mean, that's, children, at least now, the children that are going to actually see the savings from that are alive. But there's no child in our district that will see the true savings of that.
The plan was set up as a savings to begin with. And it may have a...
There's none.
You know, we can get back to that later, but there is a savings to the plan. There is a savings. It does create savings. We're going to have a caucus.
I guess we're going to have one, probably, I'd make a motion.
Make an executive session.
Turn to executive session for, how long do you guys want?
Yeah.
15 minutes. 15 minutes.
So just how about back here at 10 after?
So I'll make a motion to enter into executive session with all members of the Board of Education, to include the superintendent and board attorney, for a period of 15 minutes to begin at 5:55, returning at 6:10. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Board Member Schwartz. Call for the vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
January 27th.
The one with the additional?
Yeah.
Well, this is one he handed out last week. The one I-
Well, the one.
Well, she handed it out.
I handed it out, because
Oh.
I made copies off the actual letter that gives.
Well, that's the one I have now.
This is the letter that gives. Because I don't have this kind of paper.
I do.
And this is the one that's actually signed, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, how do you get something? I have something that you ignore. I don't want to ignore it. Like she texted you something? Someone texted me.
Well,
And
then
I
they
think
didn't
it's-
want it.
I don't know.
I know.
Yeah, that's-
But
that's-
it was quite interesting.
Instead of, oh, well, what is it called? I think you gave me that.
We took a picture.
That's
Did you
there.
have it?
That's an old one.
Did you bring your pictures from our?
I did.
Yeah, you just showed us the picture. That would have been the grade 18, 12, 15, 15. Our grade grade might be ages.
Himself short on this one.
No, oh, was it a phone message?
No, it was a text.
Okay, it's still there. What does that mean?
I think because
I
it
don't know.
was long enough.
Was it something that called you then?
No, it was a text
About
message.
till next summer.
Instead of, I went to hit list and I hit ignore. So there should be an ignore file somewhere.
See, this was forwarded.
Oh, yeah.
And the next time was the last
That's good to know. All the more reason.
Do you know who it was from?
No, no clue.
That's still too many.
Oh, I know.
They're never going to be too.
For age, it might be right. For age, it might be.
My blood sugar is probably 450 now.
This is my last.
We need to go eat some protein.
So
That's right.
So when we call for,
Flyers there as well.
Yeah.
when we call for caucus, should we all?
That was my last one.
Yeah, the school nurse.
We need Mr. Garrison to show
Why
up.
don't you work as a Charlotte?
We need to nurse.
Yeah, that's the one. Sorry. Means I had one out of
Several.
there's 6. This meal, on Sunday, my thing was up. Yeah, it was last year.
Was the first year of this one, the first 2 weeks.
Oh, he does, yeah, he does. I need a new phone. Yeah. But then I would have to put it on.
Good, Greg? Okay, go ahead and call the meeting back to order.
Well, that's giving us a lot to think about. And we wonder if you could, when would you be able to let us know which maybe the 4 items you want to have proposals for at our next meeting?
I'm not sure we can do that. I mean, I think what we're planning on is just to give them, explain them, and then, I don't know if we want to tackle it that way. I mean, we could probably,
I mean, we're going to need your proposals in order for us to address them in reply. And it'd be nice, I mean, we're going to need time to do that too, because clearly you've done research and we need time to do that as well.
Which ones do you want to do and all?
Do you guys have a preference?
Well, since we already have a lead committee formed, is there the ability for us to try to address some of those options or ideas as to hearing the proposal on whatever PTO is the board as a direction, or as to whether or not in the idea of cap number to be able to help give the committee direction, also an understanding?
I'm not sure. Yeah, if you, are you saying you want them to present to us?
No.
You're saying-
To understand since we already have the leave committee established, to have the understanding of truly what the board direction was to possibly foresee as to, because it's somewhat.
I mean, for us, we've got $1.5 million in unfunded liability, and we've talked a little bit about that, and, you know.
Which is an excellent number to be able to put out there, but to also know that the committee also established that over a 10-year average, that the board should be able to predict anywhere from, on average, about $170,000 a year.
Right,
I mean,
but the problem with that, though, is it's still $170,000 a year, and, you know, I mean, you guys have presented some arguments at the last meeting, but, I mean, it's just unheard of in any school district to have unlimited amount of leave time. It's unheard of in the state to have unlimited amount of leave time.
Well,
It's unlimited in virtually any employment opportunity in this city to have
Isn't
unlimited leave time.
And I think that's the reason why is to hearing this to the proposal of in terms of a cap.
Right.
To be able to hear that proposal as to what your cap might be, or even the
You're basically saying
PTO.
you want to take what we're presenting back to the committee, and basically.
Well, yeah, so that would be like one of the first proposals I'd be able to hear, so you can be able to, I guess, that's what I was just saying, that was one of the first.
We don't
proposals.
have authority for that, but I don't know that that would be, I think the board would be receptive to that. I wouldn't have no objection to it.
Okay. So I think that I was just trying to help or assist in what possibly those first 4 or 5 proposals to be able to hear from would be. And so, and I think that maybe those are 2 out of the 19 things that were listed today, because one of them dealt with PTO and the other one dealt with the idea of a cap.
Yeah, and I think
But they're almost
we'll probably put
conflicting.
them together
Right.
as a package deal. I mean, I just think it would be.
But they're different, because one's severance and one's sick leave. You know, I mean, the whole accumulation of sick days comes under D, severance pay, because, I mean,
They have different titles, but they're the same thing. I mean, you're taking your uncapped sick leave and turning it into a buyout at the end. I mean, it's.
And I think by what you need in your proposal, that's where you'd also have like those grandfather provisions in.
Right,
And
I mean,
that
all
sort
of
of
that
thing,
would be-
and to be able
Right.
to hear as to what, who would be facing the most significant changes, and those who would be able to greet those changes with open
Right.
arms, or, yes. But to hear those proposals would be excellent.
Well, there could be a tiered approach too, where you know, up to this number of days, it's this dollar amount, from this to this, it's another dollar amount. And I mean, those are what some of the plans we've looked at are, you know, we talked last time about what the state plan is. And, you know, I mean, I think those are all things under consideration.
and the state severance pay, the unused days, is based on their pay. Is that something you're looking at as well?
I don't know if you are, but I mean, it's, I think we're going to have a plan. I'm not saying, we're not closed off to ideas and discussions. So,
Yeah, I think that's a great reason as to why we want to take it back to the committee and do that sort of stuff.
Another one? I mean, do we want to have 4 or 5?
That's
If
too
we look
many.
at leave.
yeah,
That-
for a 2-hour period. that's-
No, I understand, but, you
Yeah,
know, I guess we can work on whatever, but,
you guys have a preference? Do you want to just do that one, or you want to do? mean, I think.
Well, I'm trying to think of
more
it.
one at a time.
I guess I'm trying to think of the list too, as to whether or not there's more amicable ideas as to things that I think both of us had notices, but we thought that we'd probably already made ground on in terms of like the supplemental ideas to revise language on that, or is that something that's so,
You're talking about the soccer, and that, or
the things, yeah, that got noticed, I guess, in terms of that, and I think it was maybe third one down on the list or something like that, but, sorry, my computer's.
Supplemental.
Here, you want to borrow my charger?
Here's our list.
I don't know, we
Here's our
have
list.
an issue talking about supplementals, but I don't think that's going to happen. You never does. It's-
Right, I mean, but like in terms of just,
You can get some agreement, it's always nice.
I don't know, do you have a proposal for the hours and amount of work?
Add that to it.
sure.
That was a couple of items, but I think, I mean, again, that one's probably best to package all together too.
Right, which I think would help maybe narrow down the list that we're looking at today after.
So you think you're going to work on getting a proposal together for leave that we can refer to committee. You're going to look at getting a proposal together for hours and amounts of work.
You guys, I don't know if that's too much on that.
You mean for next time?
It's probably a great
Oh, I think,
That's
you know,
probably,
Well, the leave, we won't talk about next time because you'll take
Well,
it to
but we need to
committee.
hear
is
the
that right?
proposal. I think
Oh,
that
we'll hear the
we can hear the
proposal.
proposal and we can ask questions and digest from the.
If we get something out to you early.
Exactly.
We'll try, but, I mean, the problem with it is, I don't know how that's gonna happen.
Right.
Because we don't meet before the next meeting.
well, don't you like,
But they have, it's the week off.
We don't have a work session.
You don't have a work session on Monday. Okay.
We could.
what do you,
No special one.
We could have a special meeting just to address that. I'm not gonna.
I mean, as the spokespeople for your sign, don't you, I mean, we don't get all the teachers together either every time, but do you have the authority to go ahead and put together some things that, from previous conversations with the board, or do you don't?
This is, I mean, we don't, that's not what we talk about, so. Oh, we can meet Monday.
Well, I didn't know either about the legality of, yeah, of whatever happened. I didn't know about exchanging emails or doing two things a day. That's
Specifically the PTO.
Good.
Schedule hours.
Yeah, leave, PTO, captive, all of that, and then hours and amount of work, those two things. And then the supplemental salary piece, which yeah, it will.
So you're going to put together something you think about hours and amounts of work, and the
Sick
leave,
leave PTO.
PTO piece, you're going to put together some sort of proposal.
On the concurrent credit, is that something?
I'm getting the language from Barton County yet on how they do that. I mean, I think I can write the language pretty well for the Fort Hays because it's really,
I was just thinking of something, maybe it's one of those easy to agree on items.
not necessarily, but,
well, I mean, we had talked about it before.
right.
And I just need to see, and Dean, you may have this, I sent it to Marty, but the memorandum of understanding from Barton County.
Probably.
I need to know, they don't sign individual contracts like Fort Hays has their concurrent credit staff do. And so I need to know how that's worded to protect both entities, the teachers who teach for Barton County and the teachers who teach for Fort Hays. Like I said, Fort Hays is fairly easy for me to rework the language. But
I'll get it.
Barton County, I don't know.
You don't have theirs?
I don't
Okay.
have their memorandum.
Okay.
Do we want to decide as the third one in the concurrent credit to put that on?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if I can get that early,
We'll
yeah.
have some, Joel, we have something. I mean, if you have something, that'd be great too. If you guys have something, we
I
can actually
think
talk about it.
we had talked about it because it was brought to our attention that the board wanted to do that.
And if that may be an easy one that we could actually have some discussion on, that it's not as complex as some of the others that maybe not.
Before we get into debate.
I don't think we're going to avoid that.
Huh?
We're not ready yet for that.
You're not ready for that? Okay.
Yep.
The intervention meeting time for elementary teachers.
Three hours, like.
I think 3 is plenty.
I think that's probably a good start.
For arbitration on there.
That one will be a fight.
Arbitration.
I would just put it on there. No.
Three items to work on, try to get some stuff together. So if you guys can take it over, we'll discuss it.
I think that's a good place to start.
No, I don't have anything else.
So we'll just meet again next week then? Okay.
Excellent.
So 5
All right.
or 5:30?
5, Wednesday the 6th is 5:30.
Good.
Would it be Monday?
Set up a special meeting right away.
You can just call.
I will be gone May 6th. Found out today, so I want to let you guys know because that 5:30 might have been hinged on me.
Oh, if he's going to be gone, then we can meet at 5.
On May 6th?
Correct, because it might have been modified for.
I think we modified it for Josh, and he said he can't be here, he's going to be out of town.
But that's not correct.
Discuss negotiations.
It's May.
I'm gone.
Sarah will just send us out a new one. If we have just time.
If that's something that.
So we'll do that.
So are we meeting at 5?
Greg, is that what-
Next week.
On the
Next
28th.
week,
Huh?
the 6th.
Great. Special meeting on the 27th, or do you want to move to the 6th?
No, you're going to need it on
27th?
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and call a special meeting for
You just need to call.
April 27th. Evening? Same time, 6:30? Or you got it back?
I'll do that. Last time.
Lance? Or you want to go earlier? 5:30?
Are you here? Or is that
27th?
Yeah.
Is that
next Monday? Do 5:30?
Now you do 8 a.m. to 5:30, whatever you guys want to do.
Go 5:30.
You go.
All right, Sarah, we're going to go 5:30, special meeting, Monday, April 27th, for purposes just to discuss negotiations.
So we'll need to be straight into
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
we'll
you.
straight into executive session.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thanks, guys.
How's everything?
Great.